Hi guys, Samantha from Jessica Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to create those beautiful purse pendants. So if you have a look here, you can see that it opens up like so, and I'm going to be showing you how to create that. So just put this back up. There we go. So I'll be showing you how to create that. Now before we start, you can use just about any surface, well, not surface effect, just about any cane you want for this. You can also use faux effects such as turquoise to create this effect. I would not recommend using surface effects that you cannot sand, simply because this project does require a lot of sanding. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting out with surface effects unless you can get your shape perfect, to which you would not need to do sanding. So I'd highly recommend starting out with a cane that can be overlapped easily, or a marker shift or a mukume gane. Those two effects would work really well. Now, we're going to be using my faux Larimar Dash water or pool effect cane. Now I will have a link in the description of this video to that tutorial if you are watching this on Patreon, and if you are watching this on YouTube, that link should be in the PDF with the tutorial that you purchased. So this is my cane that we're going to be working with. We're not going to start with that. We first need to make our base. So you're going to need some sort of a doming tool. These are also metal soap bars. So I'll bring over a few examples of these. So I have a bunch of different ones on my shop, and the ones that I would recommend that you can use are these three over here. Around, you could definitely try out, but it might not necessarily work as well as, say, these shapes. And now each of them are going to give a different shape, and keep in mind that with this tutorial we're essentially going to be cutting it in half and using only the bottom half, so this is the one that we're going to go with. But any of those shapes would work, so if you're looking for one of these, check out my Etsy shop. Then you're going to need a nice long sheet of black polymer clay. Okay, and I'd recommend that this clay be about at least a millimetre, or a maximum, excuse me. Sorry, my words are really getting confused today. I would recommend that this sheet of clay be a maximum of a millimetre thick. I'm going for half a millimetre thick today. And you can see it's a nice large sheet of black. Now the reason we are using black today, you can use any colour you want normally, but with this cane it is slightly translucent, and so the clay that is underneath the sheets from our cane is going to make a difference. So I wanted it to have a slightly green dark hue, and so that's why I'm using black. If you used white it would come out with a more blue pale effect. So just bear that in mind if you are going to be using the pool water cane. Okay, so I'm just going to take this . And I'm going to grab two pieces. It's easier if we work with two separate pieces rather than one whole wrap. You end up with less overlap. Okay, so I'm going to put that to the side. Just put that over the top and smooth. Make sure that you're removing air bubbles. You don't want any air bubbles trapped. And fold over the sides. Being careful again to not trap air bubbles as you're doing it. Now if it folds at the side, that's fine, since we're going to be cutting that and putting in another sheet of clay in a minute. And take your blade, and it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Just run that along the outside like so. and then remove your excess. Okay, I'm just going to trim away this section here. Okay. Right, then bring over your other piece, lay that on top, and again smooth over, making sure there's no air bubbles being trapped. And then smooth it against where you cut the other piece of clay. Press down, not too hard, I'm just basically smoothing it up against the line where we join the other clay. Then I'm going to remove it. And can you see how we have a line? I'm not sure if you can see that on there. There. It will create a line that we can then roughly trace. It does not have to be perfect, but I will just use a craft knife to very quickly trim that out. Do that. Okay, and we'll have a little bit of excess clay, which is fine. You want to get as close as possible. We can most certainly trim away a bit of that excess in a moment. Just smooth over. Make sure that the two sheets join together so you have no open spaces. Then you can grab your blade and very gently run along the surface and trim away any excess clay that might be there. Because we want to make this base as smooth as possible so that when we do put our canes over the surface, we're not picking up any lumps or bumps that our base clay has. We're almost done here. Okay. Then I'll just use that to quickly grab those. Okay. Then just use your finger to very gently smooth these edges. And now you might be wondering why I'm coating the whole thing when we're only going to be using half essentially. Now you have two options. If you're going to be making a few of these, you might as well coat the entire thing. Cut it down the middle, bake it, and then remove both, and then you'll be able to actually make two of these pendants. But I am only going to be making one. So what I do is I coat the whole thing so that we can get a nice even effect, and then I cut off half of it. And you might think that that uses up some extra time, and it might use a little extra time, but it gives a better finish if I do it that way. Just make sure that that seam has been covered properly, because if not, you might find that your clay splits there later on, so you don't want this to be a weak spot. Okay, and I'm not too worried about fingerprints at this point. Okay, then I'm going to grab my blade and I'm going to position it so it's halfway over. Okay, then I'm going to cut. Bring that around. Get those two to meet up. And then I generally take whichever side met up better. This one's the one that I'm going to remove. Okay, and then once it's removed, what I do is I then put it into the oven for at least 40 minutes at the recommended temperature. I'm using Primo, so that's the temp. So that is the brand that I'm using, but any brand will work for this, so long as it is nice and strong. So I just like to remove all this excess clay, like so. And don't worry if the edge is a little raggedy at the moment, that is fine, because we're going to be doing an extensive amount of sanding during this project. That is the only thing about this project. It does require a lot of sanding, but it's well worth it in the end. I'm just quickly smoothing these sides, making sure that I'm happy with them. And then because we've got a grip over here, we can actually just smooth over the general thing, making sure that we don't have any fingerprints, or at least minimize them. And that's not completely necessary, but I generally like to do that anyway. Okay. And then I'll put that into the oven for 40 minutes at pretty much recommended temperature, and then when it is done we can move on to creating the overlay. Okay, so it's out of the oven. Now I did pop it into some water just to get it to cool down, because when it comes out of the oven this is going to be very hot. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piercing tool and I'm going to nick in there, and I'm just going to go around the outside here. And I'm just going to lift it up from the metal. You might find that it's a little bit of work to get it to lift up, just because it will stick to the metal frame. But you should be able to work it off. So I'm actually going to just dry this top part over here. Hopefully get myself a better grip. But it will come off. There we go. Just go get it to unstick that. And that is why the needle tool's really quite nice, because it can pick out most of the seam, and it's just the bottom that you really need to get rid of. Now I know that these sides are not tidy right now. That can get tidied up later on. You don't have to worry about doing that right now, because right now I'm going to put this to the side and we're going to take our cane and we're going to start slicing. Now what I'd recommend doing is, if this is a new cane and it's nice and warm, then by all means just go ahead and slice it. But this one's a little old. I actually made this about 3 years ago. The tutorial where I used this cane actually was made about 3 years ago. So I just want to warm it up just a touch. Just a little bit, should be fine. Now I have got a bit of water on the towel here, so I'm just getting rid of that. There we go, so that I can get this to stick down. It will make the slicing a lot easier. Then grab a blade, we're going to start taking slices. Okay, and I'm going to get as many as I can out of this. Okay, and there is about the number that I got out of it. So that should be enough. If not, I do have another cane off to the side here that we can use. Okay, so now that we've got that, I would like you to apply this back onto this metal base so that it's got some support. It will make it easier for us to work with it. I also want you to grab some translucent liquid clay. I'm just going to pop a little bit on there. And just drop that over the surface, and you don't want it to be really slippery, you just want it to have a nice kind of sticky coat to it. And it's so nice having this metal base, because it means that we're not going to be touching it with our fingers, getting fingerprints or anything like that. It's a nice hands off experience. So now I'm just busy getting rid of any excess liquid clay that I might have by just wiping that off. There we go. Okay, put that to the side. Now with these, if we overlap them, we're going to get very clear seam lines. So what I like to do is I like to just rip these edges to just get rid of the edge part. Now you're going to waste a little bit of clay like that, but you're going to find that it's a much cleaner finish than if you just overlap them completely. And this works fine with this cane because it's a fairly organic cane. With something like a kaleidoscope, you'll have to be a lot more careful. And so generally I would not recommend starting with something like a kaleidoscope. nice easy cane where you can rip these edges off. Works pretty well. So I'm just going to do that for all the slices. And then when I'm done with that, then we can start applying them to our base. Okay, so now we're ready to get started. So I'm just going to take these and I'm going to lay them down, like so. And I'm going to try to not overlap pieces when I put them together. Keep all of those little excess bits that you ripped off, because you can use those to patch in any holes that you might have. And don't worry about cracks like this, we can easily get rid of that later on. Right now we just want to be putting this together. Okay, and so I can see that I have two sections here, so I have this little piece off to the side here. And I'll just rip up a piece. Place that in. And do the same here. And there we go, you can see that's patched up nicely. This one I'm just going to rip so that there's not too much pressure being put on it. And so you basically just patch it in like so, and then you just take other pieces to patch up the sections. And this is why I said to kind of rip up the edges, because now it means that you can go in and you can patch it up. It makes it much easier for you to clean up sections, and it also doesn't give you a seam line. And now right now it might look like a complete and utter mess, and it will look like that to begin with. Don't worry about it. Once we smooth it over and get everything fixed up, it will look much better. So I'll put these to the side, and I'd recommend putting on a pair of gloves. And this is just so we can avoid fingerprints while we do the next part, which essentially is to go along each of these little seams, and you want to smooth that out by pressing over the surface, like so. And you are going to get some marks from the gloves. I'm going to try to avoid that as much as possible, but it's pretty hard to, because I can never find gloves that fit me. But yeah, basically I'm just going in and smoothing over these seams by just pressing, and then we can get an even smoother finish later on once we have done that. But right now our main priority is to get rid of these really jagged seams. Okay, and now you might find that you have air bubbles. If you do, you can always just take a blade, cut, and push out that bubble. Okay, and so we're getting to the point now where we can start properly smoothing. Now I'll probably take the gloves off now. And again, going to be doing a lot of heavy sanding, so smudges and smears, not a huge issue right at this moment. I can still feel like there's an air bubble up here. Just put that out there. There we go. Okay, and just continue going over and making sure that the entire piece is smooth, and we can get rid of the fingerprints later. You don't even necessarily have to have the gloves. I found that they weren't really working that well for me, so I took them off. and just try to get as smooth a surface as you can as far as cracks go. Do not worry about fingerprints yet at this point. Okay, and there we go. So once you're done with that, use your hand to smooth over the surface like so, and this will remove the majority of your fingerprints. Now again, I'm going to be doing a lot of sanding later, so although you want to remove as many as you can, you don't have to stress too much about it, because we are going to be doing sanding and that should remove most of them as well. Okay, then the last thing that I want to do is I just want to clean up any dirt that we probably got on here by bringing over some 99% isopropyl alcohol, and you just spray that onto a wet wipe or a baby wipe, whatever you call it. Just going to quickly use that to clean up the surface, because sometimes I get stray alcohol ink crumbs on here and then that tints the clay, which is something that I really don't want. Not too worried about hair or anything like that that might have got on here, because again, the sanding will take care of that. I'm just trying to get rid of anything that might stain the clay. Okay, and that should work. Now, last little thing I want to do is I'm going to grab my tissue blade and I want to go and trim this edge. I don't worry about trimming it completely clean, because again, sanding, we're going to be getting rid of that. But I do want to reduce as much of the work as possible by just cleaning up most of the excess clay. Like so. There we go. And again, we'll sand that to make it nice and clean later on. Okay, and then I put this back into the oven for about, I'd say around 40 minutes at Burroughs recommended temperature again. And then after that, we are going to take it and sand it, make this bottom piece nice and clean. We'll give this a nice shine to it, and then we're going to work on the top part. Okay, and so here it is out of the oven. So now we'll just pop that off, and now we are going to sand it. So I've got it in a sink of cold water, but I also put some dishwashing liquid in there, and that just prevents the dirt or just dust from clogging our sandpaper. So I'm starting with a 400 grit here, and I'm just going to sand this bottom part until I get a nice clean finish. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to move up through the grits, and I'll show you that once I finish sanding this. So you really want to be pressing hard, and you want to be getting rid of all of the excess clay so that you get a nice flat clean surface, and you should be able to run your hand over this and not feel any jagged edges or anything like that. Okay, and there we go. So now I can run my finger over this without getting snagged at all. So now you're going to take that 400 grit, and we're going to sand the rest of the piece. I'd recommend putting it onto your metal base. It just means that you've got more to hold on to while you're busy sanding this. And then you're basically going to sand with your 400 until you get a nice, completely smooth surface. And after that, you're going to go up through a 600, then an 800, then a 1200 grit. And then after that, we're going to move on to polishing papers. And this all has to get done before we can make the top part, because the top part needs to fit this part over here. And so if we haven't removed all the excess clay before we move on to the top part, it won't look quite right. So make sure you get this all sanded, and when you're done, then we can move on to the actual creation of the lid. Okay. And now as far as the polishing papers go, I'm going to wait until after we've baked it again, because the polishing papers essentially just polish it, and so we don't really need to do that until we get to the last step. But you can see how this is nice and smooth, we don't have any cracks or seams, and when I run my hand along it, it's very nice and smooth to the touch. So the next step is going to require you to have a piece of black polymer clay rolled out on the thickest setting of your pasta machine, which is about 2 millimeters thick for me. And I'm going to take my bottom piece and I'm going to press that down and then lift up. And what this is going to do is it is going to create a shape for us to cut out. Now you always do it this way instead of using a cutter or anything like that, because this way you make sure that you basically get the exact same shape, so that when you slot the lid onto the bottom part of the purse, it fits. If you used a cutter, it would not fit. And you'll see what I mean as we progress through this part. This is the part that is going to slot into the purse, it's not the actual lid. Okay, I'll lift that up and then use your blade to just smooth these edges. And what I do is I then use my fingers to run along the surface to smooth up this edge so that it is more of a beveled edge rather than a straight down sort of an edge. Then when I'm done with this side, I will move on to the next side, lifting that up, slotting that back down again, and again pressing on these edges and then smoothing to get a nice soft finish on the piece. Now because we're working with pure black here, if you do happen to mess it up, you can always just roll it to your pasta machine and try again. So this part is very forgiving. Okay, and you can even use your blade to very gently run along the edge to clean it up a little if you need to. Okay, and then the real test is when you take your thing and see if you can slot it over the top. If not, you need to make some adjustments. Okay, and that's not slotting over the top, so I do need to make some very fine adjustments. Let's see if it'll fit now. Okay, it is fitting a little bit. And I'm just going to gently move this around. Okay. There we go. Now when we do the sanding, we're going to obviously be cleaning this up, so don't worry about fingerprints or anything too much right now. You want to try to avoid it as much as possible, obviously, but it's not our first priority. Priority number one is to make sure that this fits over it. So let's check again. Yep, and that is fitting nicely. So what I would do now, if you do not have a heat gun, when you are making this piece, make sure it's on a tile that you can slot into the oven quickly to just quickly bake it for about 5 minutes just to set it. If you have a heat gun, what you can do is just pop it on the hottest setting, and we're just going to set this top part quickly. Like so. I just want to set it so that when we are moving it around, we do not lose the exact shape. Okay. And now that we have a set part, I can move my hands along the side here and just quickly smooth the sides. Put that to the side. I'm going to bring this back over again, and I want you to fold it over. This is again the thickest setting of my pasta machine, so we're doubling up, grab a cutter, and I'm going to be using an oval cutter. I want to see if this fits nicely over the surface. So let's see. It's a little close, so I might take it one up. Let's look here, see if this one fits nicer. And yeah, I like that one better. Grab that. And make a cut. And now because this is quite thick, it might stick in the cutter. That's fine. I'm hoping it's not gonna. There, it didn't. But it might stick in the cutter. Alright. Then this is the top part because it has slight bevel to it. And I want to now clean up these sides. And this is the bottom part. So gently press your fingers along these sides to just get in any straggly bits. Smooth. And again, most of this is going to get cleaned up by sanding. But you can help yourself by cleaning up as much of it as you can before you bake. So that is what I am doing right now. I'm just running my finger very gently along the sides just to clean it up. I'm not pressing too hard, I'm just trying to get rid of any unevenness that I can feel. But again, sanding is going to be necessary after this. Okay, and now before we do anything, I want to take that, I want to place it on top here and see how it looks. And to be frank, it looks a little big, so I'm going to go down one size with the cutter. And that is why I say don't do anything until you've checked to make sure that you're happy with it. So I'm going down one size. And we're going to cut. And again, I'm going to repeat the process of smoothing it and then I'll check how it looks. Okay, and I've checked and I'm much happier with that size. So now I'm just going to grab a piece of plain printing paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm just very gently going to give this a burnish. Do not press too hard. This is just to remove any fingerprints or any marks that might be on here. Do not press hard because you will distort your shape. Check that side. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to position it in the position that I like the best. Okay. Then very gently press down. Do not press too hard. You just want to press enough that you're going to get an impression. Then bring over the other piece that you made and lay it down onto that impression. And I may need to mess with this a little bit. And this is why I partially baked it, because otherwise it will move around and cause issues. Check that that fits over it again. Seeing if I'm happy with how it sits, and I am not happy. And I'm just going to continue messing with it until I like what it looks like. Okay, and there we go. So you can see how that looks there. And now I'm actually going to take this opportunity while it's a little hands off to just go around these sides and quickly smooth. And again, the sanding will clean them up pretty well. But I can help myself by just smoothing off now. I'll also do that on the front. Give it a quick smooth. And then I'll very gently lift that up and out. And this got stuck, which is a little unfortunate because I'll have to do that again. But basically just continue on. That wasn't supposed to stick. If it didn't stick, it would have come out like that. And then you would pop that into the oven for a full hour at pretty much recommended temperature, and then we would sand. Okay, so here it is out of the oven. Now I have sanded it with a wet dry sandpaper like we did this piece. And as you can see, it fits quite nicely. So now we're going to move on to the polishing papers. So I'd recommend starting with the blue one, and then going up all the way until the 8000, I do believe. Just the highest grit essentially. And you're going to sand the front part over here, like so. You can see already how that's cleared it up nicely. You're going to sand these sides. Okay, and then finally this base part over here. Now you're not going to be able to sand this part. You can try if you want, but it's very hard to get in there, so I don't really worry about sanding there. It's mostly these sides over here and the front that you really want to pay attention to. And then go up through your grits and finish sanding it, and then repeat the process with this piece. Okay, now the next step is to apply some Renaissance wax. Now this isn't absolutely necessary as we don't need to seal anything. I just like using it because it takes it from a kind of satin finish to a more gloss finish. So just rub a little bit of that wax over the surface, like so. Okay. And we'll do the same with this one. You can see it has a decent shine to it, but by adding the wax we'll be adding a little bit more of a sheen to the surface. However, I am not going to be using a buffing wheel to buff this, as I think the shine will be too high for my liking, so I am only going to be buffing it by hand. So we are, we're almost done. Okay. And I'm actually going to use the back of my highest polishing paper to do this buffing for me, because it does a pretty decent job in that, and it also doesn't leave fluff everywhere. Just take that and rub as vigorously as you can. You can see there it gives it a nice satin finish. It's not the shiniest finish, but that's the sort of finish that I want. If you wanted it shinier, you could always use a buffing wheel and a Dremel. And just continue buffing this, and then buff the other piece, and then leave them to dry. Okay, now that they have dried for about 5 minutes, we can move on to drilling them. So we're going to need to drill the base of this piece, like so. There we go. Simple as that. Then we're also going to need to drill the middle of this piece, so just find that middle. Just drill through that base. Okay, now I'm going to be using this cord, and we've got these 4 ends here, so basically we need our holes to be large enough that we can fit all 4 of these cords through, so it needs to be quite large. Oops. So these are just pilot holes that we've made here. So I've got a larger drill bit over here, and I will now drill. Okay. Then repeat with this one. Okay. Now you can see that's quite a big hole. Now what I generally have to do, because I need so much space for the cords, is I will generally take my drill bit I'll actually run it along the edges and scrape away parts. And now I don't want to do too much of that so that it's visible when we string the piece. But when I don't really want to use a drill bit larger than this because it starts to crack the clay. And so I'll just take a pre-existing drill bit and just whittle away at the edges until I have enough space. Now since the Renaissance wax is dried, I can give this a quick buff just to bring out any fingerprints that I might have imprinted on it while I was doing the drilling. There we go, and that will just give it a quick clean essentially. Okay, so now I have our cord, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to find both ends. There we go. And I am going to start with this silver piece here. And it's a nice large hold bead, but the key here is that it fits very snugly onto the cord so that it can hold weight. Because I don't really want to glue this piece in place, I want it to hang there. So choose a spacer bead like this one that sits very snugly against the cord. That way it will hold the weight of our box, while at the same time you'll be able to move it. Now I don't want my cords to be all confused up, so let me just position this in the right way. There we go. Then I've got a nice little black wooden bead here, which does not weigh a huge amount. Because we do have to keep weight in mind, because the polymer clay piece, although it is hollow, does weigh a bit, so I would advise choosing beads that are not going to weigh too much. Silver beads are alright, but just try to minimize the number of large heavy beads. Wooden beads work really well. Okay, then we've got this piece over here. Push those through. Oops. Up, there we go. Then this piece, and now this one's going to be a little bit more tricky than the other ones. We should be able to get it through. Okay, we got two through. If you're having trouble with this, we can actually use something to push it through. So I'm going to try to get at least 3 of these cords through. And this might take a little bit of time, so give me a moment or two to do this. There you go, I've got 3 through. So now we want to do this last one, and you can actually use something to push it through. So just position it in a position where it can get pushed through. So just make sure those ones are through so we don't accidentally pull them through. That would be annoying. Then position that one in there, and then you can use something like your push drill to push it through. And that can take a little bit of effort. But you can do it. It's just a bit difficult to show on camera because I need to position it in ways that doesn't really promote you seeing it very well. And also it's black on the inside, which doesn't help. Okay, and if it's really giving you trouble, what you can do is you can bring over a head pin or any piece of wire really, and just make kind of a loop on there. Slot your cord on there. And then twist that around it. And just do it in such a way that you can pull on that. Then take that, push that through the hole, and drag the cord in behind it. So let's see if I can get that to do that. There we go. And there we go, that's how you do it. That's probably the easiest way to do it if you want to. Okay, then I'm just going to position that up, lock it into place. And then we're going to string on one more of the wooden beads. And another little trick with these beads, sometimes the wooden beads have these little flecks on the side. You can always use your drill actually to clean that up very easily, because I find that a lot of the wooden beads have that and it can make stringing irritating. But because it's wood, it chips away really easily, so you do not have to worry about it. You can just use a drill to quickly get rid of that stuff. Okay, and then lastly we're going to put on this little spacer bead again, the same as the one up top. And after that we are going to just finish off these little cord ends. So I'll string that on. There we go, and that's another really tight one. So now when I hold that up, it will stay in place even though I have not glued the beads, but you can move it up and down if you want. Okay, now as for these pieces, I would advise trimming each of them at an angle like so. It will make the next step a lot easier. Okay, there we go. And then I have 4 little silver pieces and 4 little wooden pieces. We're going to put the silver on first, then we put on the wood, and if you have to, you can always drill out these pieces to make the holes wider. There we go. And just string those on. And this one is just giving me trouble. I'll tell you, the first time I did this, this didn't happen. It's always when I try to do a tutorial on it that these things happen. And there we go. That one on. There we go. Then position that like so, and then do the same with all of the other ones. Okay. Now trim off this edge so that it's nice and flush. Bring that wooden bead mostly up to the edge like so. Then bring over some sort of a glue, and this glue works pretty well. And you're just going to use that to dab the edge of the cord, and also just a little bit on the wooden bead so that it all sticks together nicely. Repeat that on all of the cord ends. Let that dry for about 5 minutes, and then I can show you our piece. Okay, and then after it has finished drying, this is what you should have. You should have a fully adjustable necklace. Now, to see it properly, please do check out the photos at the beginning of the tutorial. And this part is completely adjustable, so whenever you want to open it, you would pull this up and you would be able to open up your little box up here, as you can see. And then just push that back up to tighten it together. And so yeah, when you want to wear it, you would push this all the way down to your little beads, put it over your head, and then you could push it up as far as you want to your liking. So that is basically it for today's tutorial. I really did enjoy making this. I'm going to probably do some more box tutorials if you enjoyed it. So let me know in the comments below if you would like to see more variations of this design where you have a little kind of box necklace. So let me know in the comments below and I'll continue working on different designs as there are lots of ways to play around with this technique. So let me know, and as always, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.